Alright everyone, if I sound a little bit stuffed up, I am. I've got a slight cold because, it's like dreary out. Last night I didn't sleep well, and so, I might keep the videos a little bit shorter than usual, just to, not prolong my suffering. But we've got to talk about this one case over in the UK where a kid said, he supported UKIP, I guess, and he was given detention for it. It's like basically there are these cases where UKIP's... Now, you keep in mind, you look at UKIP's platform. It is not particularly vicious. It's not even a nationalistic movement. It's a Eurosceptical movement that has a few vague shreds of populism, but ultimately, like Nigel Farage, he's not only pro-immigration, he actually suggested multiple times he wanted to increase migration. He just wanted it to come from Commonwealth states. Places that had some entailings of the latent British Empire as opposed to Eastern Europe. That's certainly not bigoted. By the way, that means that the immigrants would be far less white as well, so I'm not sure how he could be a racial nationalist or something. But they call UKIP the Nazi Party, and this is sort of what we see over here. There are people that are so far out, and they've been taken in by fear and moral panic, and they're being used as pawns, basically, by the corporate, parties of the world, like the Labour and Tory movements over in the UK are sort of like the Democrats, or, in all honesty, the neocon Republicans here. They like to stoke fear and use wedge issues, but ultimately they don't really care about the people that they're impacting, whether positively or negatively. It's like the Democrats promise over and over. If they're elected, they'll stand for special rights for women, or they're on the forefront of gay rights or something. And they never do this. They never led the charge on gay rights. The libertarians did decades before. Women's rights, they would say, be damned if it would get them more votes. They don't care about women's rights. They just use it as a wedge issue. It's like BLM. They were sitting there willing to wine and dine BLM in order to make a few bucks or get votes. They've done nothing for black communities in over a half century, and in fact, they want them to be perpetually impoverished so that they can continue to blame the other guys for their problems. I mean, it's just pure propaganda. It's football team mentality politics. Very, very primitive. It's almost like watching a bunch of witch doctors dancing around to determine who the next tribal chieftain will be. Because in a lot of cases, it really does boil down to that level of thinking. So you have people who themselves know little to nothing about politics or political history, political philosophy, declaring UKIP is a Nazi movement. Or they'll be on the far right, so-called, and they'll call the Democrats a bunch of communists or something. No, most of them are just corporate pawns. most of them are technically economic conservatives when it comes to the top-heavy corporations of the world. It's just otherwise they're socialists, because they want to destroy the corporation's competitors. They don't want them. They talk a big game about how much they love small businesses. They're like, we're going to give small businesses welfare, but they've created the situation in which small businesses suffer. You have the same thing on the right. Most of these people that have been declared fascist or reactionary, far right, and not just political people, YouTubers are the frequent target of the corporate media. And it's always a major corporation or an entity associated directly with them. It's like an open society front, the Data Society, or something, literally set up, I guess, by Microsoft, by the Gates Foundation. These groups are the ones, unfortunately, that delve into policy. They rub elbows with politicians, judges, and bullshit like that. They're the ones that are constantly talking about how far-right movements are proliferating, a big problem, and this person's far-right, that person's far-right. You wore a MAGA hat, you must be Hitler. And it's pointed out here, and this is, at first when I saw this story, I didn't think that it was real. I saw it, I think it was on the Sun or the Telegraph or something. I had to go to UKIP's own website to verify, yeah, this report apparently actually happened. They can confirm it. And they're pointing out, hey, that sort of censorship and political intimidation is itself more indicative of what was done by Nazis. Absolutely. It's because it's not right or left. It's about authoritarian versus everything else. Authoritarians versus people who care about freedom. Essentially, you can have whatever ideology you want. As long as you're more libertarian in its application, it's not abusive. You can be more collectivist, although I say that collectivism itself clashes with the concept of small government or individual liberty usually anyway, or tends to. It doesn't have to. They can be a total anarchist, I guess, just be like a total hippie. It's just they're not as common. or you can be more on the right. Like, you can be very religious and not, care to force others to be religious. Like, there are some religious movements, extremely pious, very zealous, but they don't want you to convert to their religion. They fuck outsiders, essentially. They don't really try to convert people. Some of them actively attempt to dissuade, like certain, really Orthodox Jewish groups actually attempt to dissuade in a sort of ceremonial fashion people from converting. They're like, no, just trust me, you don't want to be us, because, you're going to do rituals constantly and the world will hate you. Certain Christian groups take up this mentality, as opposed to like others that are like, you must join us or burn forever. In Islam, the same thing is true. Some groups, they don't really do active convert seeking, others do. Pagans, there are some pagan groups that will attempt to get you to join. They'll like, let us talk to you about Odin or something. There are other groups that are like, fuck it. They just wander off into the forest. So I'm not surprised. There are a lot of people who are ignorant of politics. Unfortunately, those that are the most ignorant tend to be the most forceful and emotional in the application of trying to dissuade others or proclaim some political ideology. It's like with the moral panic. The average person who's part of the moral panic, like 80-90% of them, they don't have any strong internalized ideology that's driving it. They've been convinced through propaganda as part of a group panic into participating. But they're the ones that will yell the loudest if you challenge their moral panic, because they bought into propaganda. They've been turned into thought slaves. They're literally mind slaves. So that's sort of what we see here. Now, the good news is that this kid, the detention was not applied. The teacher was reprimanded, basically told, no, you can't give someone detention because they say that they support a specific political party. I'm surprised that it isn't allowed over there. There's no free press in the UK. A judge can unilaterally muzzle the press anytime and then give them fines or throw them in the gulag for even reporting on like the Tommy Robinson stuff. There's a separate story, I think, about like some girl over in the UK said that they identified with or liked Tommy Robinson when everyone else was talking about like the Labour Party or some shit, and was like ridiculed and threatened. This happens everywhere. This certainly happens in the United States. You see it all the time. When you've got an echo chamber, anytime you endanger it, people have a tendency to get a little bit nasty. Of course, when you've got teachers enabling the nastiness, it's a little bit different than just, students berating one another over some political ideology. That's normal. It's like, fucking who cares? That's basically what happens on Twitter every day. Did you see, by the way, James Woods is active again? Apparently Twitter unilaterally removed the tweet in question that was causing his account to be locked, because he stood on principle for 2 weeks and said, I won't remove it. They ended up removing it instead, which just makes it a further issue and makes it laughable. That's about all. Peace out.